And good evening, everybody. Welcome to Going nuCLEar, full-blown coverage of the land, presented by Buzz Sports CLE. I am Ethan Greenberg, and alongside of me is my co-host, Madison Delaney. Madison, how are we doing on this fine Thursday evening?
We're doing well. It's a short work week. I got another short work week next week because we just have a random Monday off, and I will take it every time. How are you?
I am doing pretty well. As we were just discussing, I'm a little bit tired. I overextended myself last night, and I got to say, I just cannot do this late hour thing and getting up early in the morning to go to work the next day. It just does not work out well for me. Um, Struggle through the day, and then I'm sitting there, and about 6 o'clock or so in the evening, if I don't have anything going on, I crash. I'm sitting there watching some TV, and I'm like, oh man, I better get up. I've got my handy dandy energy drink here at 8 o'clock in the evening, just so that I can stay awake and be here to provide our some fantastic commentary on all of the crazy things going on in the sports landscape, in the social landscape that we have going on here. So yeah, here we are. Here we are. The Guardians tonight. Thank goodness they get to play the Royals, or at least they're scheduled to play the Royals. Right now, they're in a delay, um, but they're 2 games out of first place. We've got 4 games against the Royals. The Twins have 3 games coming up here against the Orioles. In the last 3 game set that the Twins played against the Orioles in Baltimore, they lost 2 of 3. And the Guardians took 2 of 3 from the Royals in Kansas City, and should have taken all 3. To be honest, if we're both being honest here, but it's going to be interesting if they take 3 out of 4 from the Royals. They're going to be at 500 heading into the All-Star break. Given that scenario, let's say they go into the All-Star break at 500 and are within. Let's say they stay within 2 games, even if they lose a game in the and are 2.5 or 3 out. Would you take that going into the second half of the season? Would you feel good about that as a Guardians fan, for a chance for them to contend for the Central Division Championship?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think it's like, which perspective are you looking at it from? If you're asking me at the beginning of the year if I'd feel good about that being where we stand at the midway point, I think the answer would be no, because I think the expectations were higher for this team, especially coming off of a pretty good run last year, and seemingly improving, bringing up guys from the farm system potentially. But I think right now, I mean, knowing, it's a wide open division still, and, knowing we have a bit of a history of getting hot at the right time, I think you feel okay. You don't have to, be the top of the league. You just have to get in, and then let's see what happens. So I feel okay now. I think, again, at the beginning of the year, I would have been like, I don't love it. I feel like we should be doing better than that. But we are where we are, and the door's still open.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the thing is, we talk about that scenario of, if you get in, you never know what's going to happen. I just find that, or start to think about, when you put that in perspective of, let's say, the NCAA tournament, basketball tournament, where it's one and done. You can get hot at the right time and go on a run and make it deep into the tournament. Whereas in professional sports, and heck, you might even get hot at the right time in the NFL, again, where it's one and done. Whereas if you get into the playoffs in baseball, in basketball, where you have to play in a series, a lot of those warts are going to come out if you've been playing poorly or have your weaknesses. So it's going to be very interesting to see where we are at post All-Star break. Let's see how they do to go into it. I mean, it's better to be winning and have a chance for the playoffs than to be completely out of contention. So you got that going for you. And I think we'd all love to see them in the playoffs again. It's a great atmosphere to see down at Progressive Field at the corner of Carnegie and Ontario. But they have got to get some better and more consistent pitching from their starters. that bullpen is taxed. It is just taxed. Cal Quantrill, if you didn't see last night, he got beat up a little bit, gave up 11 hits in 4 1/3 innings, and they lose. The Guardians lose 8-1 to the Braves. In his prior start against the Cubs, it was 6 runs in 3 1/3 innings. So this guy is just having not such great performances, and now they have placed him on the 15-day injured list with shoulder inflammation. He was on the injured list earlier this season. They've recalled Cody Morris from AAA Columbus. I mean, we've had some pretty clutch performances. What do we got? Bobby, Logan Allen, and Gavin Williams, all who've been fantastic coming up from the minors this season. But we're still without Tristan McKenzie because he's, and that's at least another 3 weeks or so away from him potentially coming back. We'll see. I mean, obviously, you start talking elbow injuries, and that's problematic there. And Bieber is not as good as he was in past seasons. Something just ain't right, and I don't know what it is. And sometimes I started thinking about this today, and I think you can add some perspective on this from the fact that you've been a player and a coach. How do you differentiate being able to look at somebody from the outside, not seeing them at practice, and something doesn't seem right to the outsider? We're looking at the eye test, and then you've got the coaches. And you hear coach speak, and they don't have such a grim outlook, whether maybe it's just a PR move. I don't know, but do you think these guys, there's something in the mechanics? What's going wrong? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I know I have heard some debate. I think it maybe sparked up on Twitter and or Threads today about the potential that he's holding back a bit in case he is a trade chip and not running his shoulder into the ground, for a team that he may not be playing for at the end of the year, which is not an unfair, I guess, question, I would say. So that's potentially part of it. I mean, I don't think like Tito's the type that's going to like throw anybody under the bus or anything. So like, I don't think he would call him out for any of that type of stuff if he thought that was happening. If he's got an injury, he's also probably not going to say it, knowing that, they may or may not be trying to trade him down the line. And we'll see. I mean, they seem to know the right time to drop a pitcher, like historically speaking, and move him to get assets. So I do think that could be playing a little bit of a role here. Just trying to like say, because he's lost a lot of velocity. I think he's throwing a lot slower, if I remember correctly. So that potentially could just be, I mean, it could be that he's just aging out and he's getting older. But it also could just be that he's trying to save some of his best stuff for later in the season.
Right. And if he is, in fact, maybe holding back some, that kind of sucks. I mean,
a little bit.
Yeah. It really does. And that's not something you want to see out of a person, but I guess is that similar to the a player who holds out of training camp, a player who, kind of sees that the end is near, and so they try and leverage the situation as best as possible.
Clowney last year.
Right. No, you're has he signed anywhere, by the way, or is he waiting until after training camp?
Probably after, if he signs, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, that guy, I mean, talk about an inflated ego and thinking a little bit higher of yourself than you actually are. He has had a pretty underwhelming career. And, like you said, the Indians Guardians have had a history of figuring out the right time to move on from a pitcher and bring in prospects or bring in somebody else. I mean, as nice as it would be to make it into the playoffs, obviously I'm a fan. I'm going to be rooting for him. I'm going to be cheering for him, saying, hey, I want to win a World Series. But realistically, in my heart of hearts, I just don't see that happening. Not necessarily because of the pitching. I think the bats just are not consistent enough. And again, in the pitching realm, we're talking about this bullpen, which is gassed. They are just gassed. I mean, Clase, I know he and Jose Ramirez, they get named to the All-Star team. Not starters, but they get named to the All-Star team. Okay, Ramirez, I guess the good thing is in baseball, it's not a physically daunting thing to be in the All-Star game. It's not like basketball. It's not like even, the previous version of a Pro Bowl in
Mhm.
football, et cetera. It's relatively minor. Um, I don't want to see Class A pitch. I don't want to see that guy, but he needs to give his arm a rest and regroup for the second half of the season. Do you think it's possible? And I mean, I'm just throwing out a theory here that teams are seeing enough of him that they've got a good idea of what his pitches are going to be. They better than they may have had in the past, last season or even earlier this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I guess, a possibility that figure out a guy, so to speak. It tends to happen at some point for everyone, I guess. I mean, kind of to your point though, like about running, like we really we have a pretty, I feel like that a bit of stitching pitching together throughout the game to just try to get through the game. And so, it puts people in some spots they're not typically in. And, it's making some people pitch more than they might normally pitch. So, I trust the judgment, I think, for the most part, but it's like almost like we're going to like our playoff strategy from before, like whatever it takes to get by to the next game, like so early in the regular season. But it does bring up a question though, because like it seems like that's kind of been some of the issue, in the playoffs and like towards the end of the year, potentially like where we're running out of steam a bit. And does that style of coaching and managing have something to do with it? So it is an interesting question to raise, but hopefully they haven't figured him out and he's just like in the grind of the season, and we'll hopefully get it figured out in a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he's appeared in almost half of the Guardians games this season. That's ludicrous. That's absolutely ludicrous for them to have been in that many close games and have all these high leverage moments where we're having to sit there and bite our nails when Trevor Stephan comes into the game. And what's going on? Maybe. Now here's a wild idea or wild thought that just crossed through my head in my polluted stream of consciousness. Is it possible we could see a second half resurgence, a call up of James Karinchak?
Maybe.
I mean, it certainly would be helpful. I mean, I don't know, man. At this point, we need something going on. And what do you do? Okay, so now Cal Quantrill's going back on the 15-day IL. Does this guy keep his spot in the starting rotation, or do you have to seriously consider putting him into the bullpen for like a long relief spot?
Yeah, I think it maybe depends on if and how we move Bieber, right? Like, I know we've all been talking about getting a bat back, but are you looking to get like two semi-solid pitchers that can fit in the rotation so we can go a little bit longer? Instead of a bat potential. I mean, because the bats kind of woke up in June, whether that continues or not, we don't know yet. Remains to be seen. But they were scoring a lot of runs there towards the end of the month, especially. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see what they do, and if they do decide to move him, what that package back looks like, and if they're trying to get some at least one starter, you probably need to get back for sure. And if you're trying to find a second to kind of fill out that rotation a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing when you think about the rotation that Tito Francona had going into the 2016 World Series. I mean, we're talking about Kluber, talking about Trevor Bauer, Josh Tomlin. I mean, Cookie Carrasco. Other than Kluber, who did any of them have consistent careers? I don't think so. I'd have to
Yeah.
look at their records for sure, and you like most of them. Not necessarily in the end. We found out, Bauer, he's kind of a crazy dude. Um, you know, but
Yep.
he just has a way with putting these things together. So it's hard to get down on this team, knowing that they've got a Hall of Fame manager. Maybe that's just the difference between being a Guardians fan and seeing the best in them and hoping for the best, or feeling like there's still a chance, versus looking at some of our other Cleveland franchises and saying, "Oh, the chips are down," because the coaches have been
Yeah.
not exactly great. So
Right.
I don't know. I mean, where is our Ellie Dela Cruz?
Yeah.
Where
Probably
where
down in the minors somewhere, probably.
I mean, when we had Logan on, Logan Petoskey, and he
Hmm.
was talking about the guys that are coming up. I know he mentioned Brito, and I've seen his name, in the highlights for the Arrow, or for the Rubber Ducks, and sounds like he might be legit. But that's still, I mean, if he's only a double A ball, it's going to take some time. Um, Obviously, the Bo Naylor thing, that's going to take some time to really manifest itself. I mean, it's obviously good that he's up here because Zanino wasn't doing squat.
Hmm.
So it's really no worse as long as it doesn't stunt his growth, which I don't necessarily see that it will. As long as his head, he stays straight in the head, and doesn't get too discouraged. Maybe Oscar Gonzalez can make another run up here because he's a big boy. He can put a
Yeah.
charge behind that ball. It sure would be nice to see the Guardians find some hidden weapons of sorts, or at least be able to draft somebody. I mean, where's is there another Bryce Harper entering the majors anytime soon, from the college ranks? I feel like we've talked about this before. I feel like there's a blind spot in the scouting department for the Guardians to find us some power hitters, as good as we are
Yeah.
with finding pitchers.
Yeah, it's definitely been the theme, I think, for several years in a row now. When it gets you by, sometimes you feel like it's good enough, and they haven't really altered their strategy too much. At least it doesn't seem that way, or they're not bringing them up. It's always been so wild to me that it takes so long for baseball players to like really debut. Like it's such a long process where everyone else gets thrown in as a kid. They're just like, good luck.
Well, exactly, and that is a very good point that you make, because let's think about it. In the NBA, these kids are coming out now at 19, 18, 19
Yeah.
years old, whatever. And maybe they weren't to their peak, their prime. They aren't fully developed, their bodies. But they come in and they participate and they play against these guys. What is the difference between college, kid who's hitting in college? Is it just that the pitching is so much better at the major league level than it is at the college level, that they have to come up that curve? I really wonder about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's because the really, really good ones get drafted so early where they're not even going to college. So you're really not getting the best of the best. And that is a fair statement. And then, when you have kids that young, I guess, but let's trial by fire. That's the best way to learn. I always thought, so throw them in there.
Yeah, you learn on the job. I mean, I've found in my professional career, there's been some things. I mean, even my first professional broadcast, I was one day I'm there as the intern, the next day I'm filling in and going on the road and headed down to Chillicothe to broadcast a game. And I mean, I didn't have much time. I had to, it was a quick learning curve to come up, but I did it. And so, like you said, trial by fire there. So, the Guardians are the Guardians. Let's see if they can get that one in tonight against the Royals. This homestand of 4 games, head into the All-Star break, have a few days off. I know some people are making a thing out about Josh Naylor not being named an All-Star selected as a reserve. But you know what? First of all, he's got a sore wrist, and he might be back in the lineup. But again, I don't know. Unless it's just a prestige thing, I'm not so concerned about it. Do you think there's some kind of and maybe it's a contract thing or some kind of I'm trying to think of the right word here, like an accelerator, like, hey, if you make the all-star team, you get this much of a bonus. What's the big hubbub?
Yeah, potentially, I guess. I mean, I think there's always just the general feeling of like Cleveland getting slighted, in some form or fashion because it's Cleveland and for really that reason and that reason only. So I think that's probably a lot of it. I think it's pretty hard to get. I mean, we got two, so I think it's pretty hard to get three when you're sitting where we're sitting currently with our records. So like, I don't really have any complaints about it. I mean, we also didn't get off to the best start for sure. So, he had a good month, recently, and he's been swinging the bat better. But I don't know if it was strong enough, in my opinion, to really warrant all the hubbub. But it is what it is.
It absolutely is what it is, and I kind of feel like, look, dude, if nothing else, use it as some motivation. I know that some people say, well, you shouldn't need blah, 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 and blah to motivate you. But I think that professional athletes in general kind of operate differently. And whether it's bulletin board material or feeling slighted, whatever motivates you to go out and do even better, I'm all for it. Whatever. I don't know the daily ins and outs. All I know is what I see out on the field. And I sure hope that maybe he gets a chip on his shoulder and goes out there and starts just knocking the cover off the ball. Certainly, that defensive performance the other day was a little bit lackluster in the ninth inning as they blew that game. So hopefully he can pull that all together. Moving forward, it's kind of a quiet period here. It's early July. Not much news going on in Brownstown. And Cleveland is clearly a Browns town. Today I saw that Deshaun Watson and all the receivers are down in Miami. Looked like they were working out at an indoor facility, maybe on the University of Miami campus. To me, that's a great sight. That's a very good thing to see. Look, they are just a couple weeks away from training camp opening. We are just over, it's just under a month from now. A month from today, I guess 4 weeks. Is that about right? I think 28.
I think so.
28 days from now, the Browns are going to open up this season, taking on the Jets in the Hall of Fame game. I mean, I'm jacked up for that. And I'm glad to see that Deshaun is working with these guys. I hope that the rest of the league is sleeping on the Browns because I feel like I don't know why it is. And maybe it's just the superstitious part of me, but I feel like we operate better when there are zero expectations and no one has us as like the hot take pick for, being a Cinderella story and going to the Super Bowl. And as I look at the roster, and you tell me your thoughts on it, but as I look up and down the roster, I feel like we are pretty well positioned. There are not going to be many positions that are decided in training camp. I don't have, obviously, I'm not looking at the depth chart right now. But of those rookies that got drafted, I don't know how much playing time is going to be available. Who's going to make the 53-man squad? Who's going to be on the practice squad? Just feel like we've got a lot of the right pieces.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to feel like on paper we look, really good. I think the most interesting part of camp is going to be who wins the corners. The corner spot, because you have three now. If we're not playing Newsome in the slot anymore, you've got three pretty good corners vying for the two spots. So that'll be really interesting, I think, to see in terms of, starting roles and who is going to fit that. We'll see who ends up the odd man out in that, and hopefully it won't cause any problems. I'm guessing it's probably new. He's already potentially, had some rumors pop up. So we'll see how it goes, I guess.
Well, from what I was reading, and I don't know if you caught this article, but it sounded as if um, they're all going to be these guys in the defensive backfield, the defensive backs: Emerson, Ward, Newsome. Sounds like they're going to be moving around, and it may result. Newsome talked about one of his gripes was the whole thing about how much he ended up playing in the slot last season. And from what I was reading, it sounds as though Schwartz is kind of indicating sometimes it might be Ward, sometimes it might be Emerson, sometimes it might be Newsome that end up in the slot. So it sounds as if Schwartz, just in general, I think we would all agree that should be a vast improvement over the defense and the strategy that Joe Woods was putting out there last season and even the season before, for that matter. Hopefully, we're just going to see a lot less finger pointing. But yeah, I think the cornerbacks, that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch and to see how it all breaks down as we head into the season. I mean, I'm pretty certain you're going to be talking. Ward's definitely going to be in there. And then I guess the question will be who's going to be out there on the outside starting. Emerson certainly played well enough last year. He's got the size, the coverage ability, but Newsome's good too. I know he hasn't managed to get an interception yet, but I got faith in the guy. He's all right. So we'll see what happens. Plus, we got and the name is slipping me right now. We got another defensive player, did we not? From is it Caleb Mitchell from Northwestern?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know the name if that's correct, but we did get a corner from Northwestern.
Okay, so we've got some irons in the fire there, and it'll be, we'll see what happens. I'm just hoping, obviously, some of the additions, with Rodney McLeod coming in and kind of anchoring the I think the safety and the defensive backfield will be helpful. I think the linebacker is going to be a good we'll see what we've got out there. I don't know if by virtue of having a larger front four and a better run stuffer up front, if you're going to protect the undersized linebackers, because JOK is quick, but the way they were talking, he looks like he might have even lost some weight and muscle or mass from last season, and we certainly don't want to see these guys getting any smaller. And all these guys coming off injuries, Phillips, Taki, JOK. That's kind of rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we shall see. And who do we have, or what do you think they're going to do for a third running back? Because right now we're looking at we've got Chubb and we've got Ford, and I don't know who your third back is or your third option is at this juncture.
It's a great question. And yeah, I don't know the answer. I mean, I think they're running Felton right at running back again. They've flipped him back. Potentially, I guess if they wanted to keep him. I mean, I think that may depend entirely on whether or not we're like what wide receivers we're keeping, and if we're keeping a guy who returns kicks, and if we want to keep Felton back there to potentially do that, which I think we tried him at and we didn't love because we switched away from it. But he's done it, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So, and yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting because we've obviously I still feel like they don't fully believe in Ford because they didn't give him carries at the end of last year when Hunt was clearly struggling. And to me, if you believe in the guy, you would start getting him some game reps, especially in games that didn't really matter in terms of getting us to the playoffs or not. So I thought that was interesting. They've said kind of all the right things in the offseason, that he'll be a workhorse and he'll get some carries and things like that. So potentially I'm just misreading the situation, but it's a little fishy to me. And I know the trendy one that people want from Ohio State is Zeke. And hey,
That's not
maybe.
happening.
I mean,
I
maybe.
highly doubt it. He's not coming here to sit and be simply a filler inner third down back or anything of that nature. I'm kind of thinking
He's got
about it.
nowhere to start, though. Where's he going to
Well,
start?
but maybe he wants to go somewhere where he can be a for sure number 2, and if somebody goes down, he gets inserted back into a starting role.
Yeah, I
Possibly.
mean, I don't really realistically think that we would actually want him or that they would bring him in. But I do think it's a little interesting because he ran well against a good O-line, or with a good O-line, I should say, not against, with a good O-line. And he'd obviously have that here as a 1-2 punch with Chubb. I think is interesting if no one's throwing a lot of money at him. Like, I don't want to do that. We have kind of some other positions. I think still the interior D-line that I would like to use some of the cap space for. But there's not a whole lot of people floating out there that are like legitimate targets for us. I don't think anyone signed Kareem yet, have they? I know he was looking at Washington.
Right. He was looking at Washington. I even saw something today, on the social media platforms that may have linked him as a potential third stringer in Pittsburgh. I would really not like to see him in the division. It's one of those things. He's a Cleveland guy. I hate to see him go elsewhere, within our division and potentially come back to haunt us. Another theory that maybe they're operating under is this. They've brought in a bunch of receivers.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to play to, supposedly, they're going to try and play more to Watson's strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're playing more to Watson's strengths, let's say they're throwing the ball a higher percentage of the time. So let's say it was a 50-50 split, but then they go to like a 60-40 split of passes to runs. So now you've got less wear and tear on the running back, just in the number of carries.
Mm-hmm.
Then on top of that, if you have an actual quarterback that's a threat, they can't load the box. And we've still got a good offensive line. If the offensive line stays intact, they're not stacking the box, and he's running less, you can get a lot more miles out of Chubb, and maybe you don't need a third running back as much as we might have in other seasons. It's just a thought that's crossed my mind here.
Yeah, they've also thrown Elijah Moore in the backfield, right? I think for some plays in minicamp, things like that. So potentially we could see some creativity.
Whoa, creativity. Kevin Stefanski, the Browns. Whoa. I don't know if those words belong in the same sentence here, Madison. That's might have to step down. We're going to have to step back a little bit here. Might be getting too excited.
As long as we don't galaxy brain it and go a little too far.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. They were talking today, and I want to do. They were talking about coaches that are potentially have a lot of pressure on the hot seat. I think Jay Williams was talking about it this morning on ESPN Radio, and he mentioned Stefanski because he does have most of the pieces and parts in place,
Mm-hmm.
and really, so there is a pressure to win, and I think it's just going to depend upon. I can't say for sure if they do X, he's safe. If they do Y, he's fired. I don't know. But I will say this. The other coaches on that list, I feel less confident in those coaches. Would you rather have Stefanski or Robert Saleh?
That's an interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting. I mean, I like Kevin, so I will go Kevin. But the players do seem to like Saleh. I feel like.
Okay. And again, this is just they're what's been proven. Do you want Stefanski or Todd Bowles?
Yeah, no, we'll take Stefanski.
Stefanski or Josh McDaniels?
Yeah, no, Stefanski. He's had enough.
I mean, Stefanski or Arthur Smith.
Yeah. I mean, Atlanta's in a bad spot.
Stefanski or Brandon Staley.
Yeah, that's another interesting one because he's also another guy that's got all the pieces, it seems like, and they have not been able to figure it out. I mean, he might have more. I mean, might have had, I mean, historically, anyways, more pieces than Kevin. And I think Kevin's done probably more.
Yeah, he has had more pieces simply because he's had a more. Granted, they seem to get bit by the injury bug pretty badly.
Yeah.
But they've had a quarterback. Justin Herbert is clearly their franchise quarterback, where the Browns have kind of been, you hoped it was going to be Mayfield. It wasn't. So now we're going to kind of see where Stefanski has Watson, has a full off season. He should be getting back into form, knocked all that rust off. And we'll see what Stefanski can do with a fully loaded, with a full tank, as it were, a full deck of cards, whatever analogy you want to make. It'll be certainly be interesting to see what happens there. So going from teams that haven't made the playoffs recently to teams that have made the playoffs and, may have underachieved a little bit, at least the way they went out. The Cavs, we get the NBA Summer League has kicked off, and the Cavs, we didn't have a chance to talk about it. They get the draft pick, the 49th pick. They go with Amani Bates, who was a number one recruit out of high school, goes to Memphis. Then there's some the issues. He goes over to Eastern Michigan, has, felony gun charge and kind of a plethora of messes there. Do you think that he has potential to be maybe the 3-and-D guy that they've been looking for?
I would say not this year.
Right. And that's fair.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, if he does, then great. Absolutely. I'm not going to not accept him if he's playing well enough to deserve that. But I mean, he's super skinny too. He's got to put on a little bit of weight, a little bit of muscle. But yeah, I think the thing that raises red flags for me with some of his highlights is he's hitting, fadeaway threes from the corner over double teams. And I'm just like, okay, that's a bad, it went in, but it's a bad shot. You've got somebody open at that point. You've got two on you. And he tends to take shots like that. And obviously a little bit of that is, at least based off of his high school ranking, right? He is the guy at Eastern Michigan. I don't know much about their team. But so he's doing it all and he doesn't have to do that now. So it'll be interesting if he can kind of step back from that and kind of take shots within the offense. But I'm excited to see him play in Summer League. I mean, it's a very, low risk, high reward. You're not going to get a lot out of that pick typically. And that's a guy that could potentially give you first round talent, if he gets back to kind of the level he was at or projected to be. So I'm excited. We'll see.
Right. So you got the Bates draft pick. Then last week, free agency opens up. Twitter falls apart. Elon Musk decides to throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing. But in the meantime, the Cavs, they kept working despite the fact that they couldn't communicate. We couldn't get the communications and the messages across Twitter and all of social media. They were busy. They were busy in a 3-team deal. They get Max Strus from the Heat. And then we get George Niang from the Sixers as a free agent. And I know it's not splashy, but I'm pretty pumped about the acquisitions. I think that you've got some people who are legitimate shooters who can help spread the floor and, to allow better driving lanes and keep the paint clear for the bigs, for Mitchell, for Garland. All of those guys are going to benefit from being able to swing it out to the corner to have someone who can knock it down. I guess, Niang, he's been in the league for 6 years. And his highest scoring year, points per game average, was 2021, 2022. He averaged 9.2 points for the Sixers. His career, he is shooting 40.3% from beyond the three-point arc. He's also an 87% foul shooter. That's good. That's excellent. I'll take that. I think he could be a good rotational player. I project him to be coming off the bench,
Yeah.
and hopefully providing a spark there. Do you think Struce is going to get bumped into a starting role along with, because you know the four that are going to be in there. You know it's going to be Allen, Mobley, Garland, and Mitchell. Will Struce be the number 5, or do you think they'll stick with Okoro?
It's a good question. I mean, he started a lot of games for Miami last year, and obviously they went to the finals. And I think he's probably like he's not a great defender, but he's sufficient, I guess I would say. Like, I think the way I heard it put earlier is like he'll give effort on defense at least. Like he may not always be in the right spot, he may not always be able to make the stop, but he will attempt to do it. Which may be good enough when you have 2 7-footers sitting behind you, right? So, I mean, probably I think they made the move so that they could have him as a starter. Like, I don't know that we ship people out, I think, for salary fill, but to make the money work. But I don't think you send 2 of your rotational guys if you're expecting just to have him as a rotational guy. So I'm assuming he'll play starters minutes, and hopefully he'll get more open looks than he got last year, because I think he shot some of the most contested threes and still shot well. So, shoots better uncontested. I think he was like 45% from 3 uncontested, which is a lot of the looks he's going to get and a lot of where Okoro was sitting. So, at minimum, the threat of him being there should open up lanes for other guys.
Yeah, I mean the Cavs they part ways with Cedi Osman and Lamar Stevens. Cedi was the last remaining piece of the
Played with
of the
LeBron.
that played with LeBron. And he had his moments. He could be exciting and infuriating, all in the same game. He could turn things around pretty quickly there. But I think that it's an improvement. And as you look at the landscape of the Eastern Conference, you got Jaylen Brown not wanting to sign a max contract. You got James Harden, who's like 1 foot out the door in Philadelphia. And then you say, okay, so I know that the Heat just went to the finals, but I still put the Cavs talent-wise ahead of the Heat. I know we lost to the Knicks in the first round, but I still believe talent-wise we're ahead of them. And you add some guys who can shoot, and you really help the situation there. So if we put ourselves in the top 4, I think really the only team that's still on very, very solid ground are the Milwaukee Bucks. They bring back Middleton. They re-signed Lopez. They still got Giannis. So Middleton, Lopez, Giannis, I think they're still going to be very formidable, and they're going to have a new voice coming in there. And that really goes to show I know we talked about this, but this is a what have you done for me lately league. I mean, they win a title with Budenholzer, and like 2 years later he's adios. He is persona non grata there. That's a pretty quick turnaround. When the team, it wasn't like they were a complete failure in the regular season last year. I mean, they get the number 1 seed. They just kind of didn't perform as well as they should have in the first round. Whether or not the Giannis, injury, missing a couple games, made the difference there, I don't know. And then the Cavs also, they re-signed Karis LeVert. I think that he certainly had a role last year. And I'd hope that they're able to keep it consistent. Hopefully there's not the injuries. No one's getting poked in the eye in the first quarter of the first game of the season. And he's not being thrust into a starting role, because he does have the ability to score, which was something that they were lacking last season at times, is another legitimate, consistent scorer. So we shall see. Are you going to be watching on Friday night if you have an opportunity? They open up 8:30, I believe, is tip off on NBA TV taking on Brooklyn.
Yeah, I love a summer league game, and I love seeing the guys that we're not gonna get to see, just because it's nice to know how they are and what they're gonna look like. Be also interesting, I think, with some of the guys that we picked and then stashed that are coming back over to play in the summer league team. My boy Pete Nance, go Carolina. Also got to bring in the Nance for the family's sake. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. And of course, we got to see how Bates looks. It's been kind of an up and down, I think, for rookies so far in Summer League. I think Brandon Miller has had more fouls than points, I think, or if not close to it. So how he does with all of that, I will be interested to see, especially since some people already want to anoint him as the starter in that role. Which is a bit of a stretch. But hey, if he earns it, by all means, keep him there.
Yeah, definitely. And then, I mean, the one thing I start to think about, so the Cavs, they have added some guys, rotational players. We're talking about Strus, we're talking about Niang. But we're not going to have, as far as I know, Rolo's not coming back.
Yeah, he signed, I think, with the Bucks.
And Rolo or Brooks or
both of them. I think both of them did.
Both of them are going to be with them. Oh, wonderful. Sideshow Bob there. And then, I believe we also did not exercise an option or keep Mamade Diakite around either. So when you start looking down the line, who do we have to come in and play the 4 and 5 spot? After Allen and Mobley. I mean, Isaiah Mobley.
Niang will play the 4, I think. He's got some size. Okay. And then we also had the trade for somebody, which we just got. I don't even think we sent Ty anything Jerome? Back. No, not Ty Jerome.
He's a guard.
Although I do like that move. What is his name? And who did he play for? There's another center who actually shot ridiculously well from 3. He just hasn't taken a lot. I think at one, he got traded, I think, mid-year last year, and he shot 71% from 3 because, he didn't take many. But career-wise, is 40% from 3. So I'm intrigued, and I know people are like, that means we're trading Allen. And it's this guy plays 6 minutes, 8 minutes a game. That's not what that means, but he would fill that role. And I think we probably still fill that spot. I don't know if we have our true backup. And I don't know. I can't remember how much money we have. I think we have a mid-level exception still or part of one. So we do need to add somebody. I know we were texting a bit. It'd be nice to add a bit of a bruiser.
Yes.
In that center spot. We answered the shooting question. What we did not answer is the toughness question. And it'd be nice to get a guy who, especially losing Lamar, who was your dog, so to speak, that,
exactly.
you relied on. Yeah. We got to get somebody that can push around a bit.
Well, you need an enforcer. I love Jared Allen. Dude is just,
too nice.
He did it. He's very nice. He seems like he's a nice guy. He's a likable guy. But when it comes down to it, who's going to do the dirty work? I mean, I feel like guys that we've had in the roster in the past. Tristan Thompson did some dirty work.
Yeah.
He wasn't flashy. He did the dirty work.
He might be available.
He might be, but he might be busy. He's got a lot of children. Very busy. Very busy man. So I don't know. I don't know about that. But, yeah, we shall see. So the Cavs open up the Summer League Friday night, NBA TV versus Brooklyn. That whole Dame Lillard thing, that's kind of crazy. I'm just hoping that in as much as Portland's talking about wanting to treat him, do right by him, I'm just hoping he does not result in a trip over to the Eastern Conference. Let's keep the balance of power. Send him elsewhere. I think I'd be happy to see him maybe in the Western Conference, where we don't even get to see their games most of the time.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like that's going to happen if his agent keeps calling up teams telling him that he won't play for them.
Right. I don't want to see him in Miami because if you put him down there with Butler, certainly makes them even more formidable. I mean,
Yeah,
you can't.
they lost two starters though, right? Because they lost Struce to us, and then they lost Vincent, I think his name is, to LA, and then you've got to ship off. I mean, it sounds like Hero's not playing for them again. He took all the Miami stuff out of his bio, and he, was man of the year for a while. Yeah, have you seen that?
I have not
And
seen that.
then yeah, so they have not. I don't think they've added anybody, and they're gonna have to ship at least something out to make the salaries work. You would think. I mean, they're also holding on to that really terrible Duncan Robinson contract, where they paid him way too much money.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see because I mean it's hard to win with just a couple guys. I mean, I know one of them's Jimmy Butler, and the other. They're both, it's Dame to all that stuff, but it might still be tough because they're not going to have a lot of options around them. I don't think.
I think you're right, but then let me ask you this question because this is what everybody likes to talk about: heat culture. Heat culture. I mean,
yeah, draft well.
As much as I hate it, and as obnoxious as it sounds, they certainly did quite a bit with nothing this year. I mean, they were one game away from being out of the playoffs and had to come back in, late in the ball game to get into the dance, as it were, and then they make a run to the finals where they got steamrolled by Denver, which certainly had the better of the teams in that matchup.
Good point. They also have Kevin. Don't forget about that.
Oh yes, we can't forget about Kevin Love. That I'm sorry, I almost forgot about that. But he's going to be tired this year. He's got a new child.
Got a newborn.
That'll tend to zap some energy right out of you. That middle age will start to hit pretty quickly at that juncture. But yeah, so it's all in all, we've got some interesting things going on here in the land. It'll be good to see the Guardians see what they can do. If they can finish strong, go into the break. If they can stay at least or within a couple of games of Minnesota, they're in it. They're in it. You never know what's going to happen. The Browns, obviously, things are going to get underway soon here, and we'll be ramping up for football, which is just unbelievable to think that we are so close to another fantastic football season. Always love that. And now we got the Cavs. And I was going to ask you, actually, Cavs, they were talking about it today. What are your initial impressions about the in-season tournament?
Oh, I haven't looked enough into it to really know what's happening. I know I've seen it compared to like soccer tournaments that they do over in Europe and all that, and like we'll get used to it and all that. I think that if I'm not mistaken, I think the WNBA does something similar, and so does the NWSL, where they do a cup in the middle of the season or throughout the season, as is the case in the NWSL. So I am okay with it. I think there's money attached to it, right? If I remember correctly.
I believe you are correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be worth it, I guess, for them to play hard, I suppose.
I suppose I really want to see how it's going to impact the overall schedule. I know they talked about, look, all the teams are going to play X games, and then so that every team has 82 games toward their record and their statistics. Whoever plays in the championship game of the tournament, at least this is what I've heard, those stats won't count. I need more details, and I want to see the schedule when it comes out to see how it impacts the balance of your games. Because if you're having to, for whatever, if the draw is such that you end up playing games against teams, extra games against teams that you wouldn't otherwise play, who are stronger opponents than someone who's in your division or whatever, the Pistons or someone like that, then I start to wonder about that and scratch my head and say, this isn't such a good deal. But I guess we will have to wait and see. I have this feeling that like I am going to reserve the right to pass judgment on this and to weigh in on it until I
Fair.
have a little bit more information. So with that, I think it's a good time for us to tell everybody what us has us going nuclear this week. Madison, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, so I think probably a couple things, but the one I will go with is on my sister's behalf.
Okay.
So, 4th of July holiday, they recently have moved out of state. We're flying back to visit, my brother in law's family. I was going to see them this weekend. All is well, right? Get a dog sitter, go through a couple, we vet them, they come, do a meet and greet. Guy seems okay, 5-star reviews, all that. And then they've gone out like a total of 10 minutes total, like letting them out since Monday. And so they have to cut their trip short. They got to fly back. They've got to, go take care of their dogs because like this guy is like letting them out at 3:30 and not getting back till 2:30 in the morning on a Wednesday. Like, what are you doing? Like hopefully, he's feeding them and giving them, all their medications and stuff. But I mean, it's just like crazy, like how people won't like, especially like an animal that's like totally helpless like that. Like you're there to keep, take care of them and like beyond that, like hang out with them and like make them feel comfortable and like play with them some maybe. Like they didn't go on a walk. They haven't done any of that. And it is hot in Texas. I get it, but like get up in the morning and walk before it's hot. It's not hard. Or late in the evening if you're up till 2 a.m. and that's what you want to do, like whatever. But that is like, I think the number one thing that has made me super thankful to have friends in my neighborhood who will take care of my dogs and I'll do the same for them. Because I know that they'll take care of him like their own. And it's just really frustrating when you go through a pet service that's supposed to be specifically dedicated to this and they can't seem to do any of the job correctly as outlined in the rules. So that's the frustrating thing for me because, it cut their trip short and I hardly get to see them now. So it's just super annoying. I, don't use that guy in Texas.
No, that would be super annoying. I know that we are at this point without pets, and I understand where you're coming from. Where if you have to leave them, if they can't make the trip with you and travel, worrying about who's taking care of them, and yeah, that stinks. That just really sucks, and it goes to how much faith can you really put in people anymore? To be
Yeah.
honest and to be as advertised. Um, yeah, that is tough and that sucks. And yeah, I hear where you're coming from there. Um, so my trivial moment of going nuclear is something. First of all, I'm just going to briefly go nuclear or rehash how I am glad that we now have this possible rival um, social media platform Threads by the folks at Meta and Mark Zuckerberg, because what Elon Musk has done to Twitter is really a mess that he made for himself. He overpaid for the company. He alienated advertisers. He alienated users by virtue of all of his ridiculous changes. The fact that he wanted to make people have to buy a blue check mark and making it essentially meaningless. It was supposed to be a way to identify people um, because they had notoriety. They were in the public eye. And so that no one else was impersonating them. And for the way he went about things, it's ridiculous. And now I think he's getting a bit of a reality check. Maybe I don't think people like him.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I don't think that people like him really ever truly get a reality check. He'll just move on to something else, one way or another. And who knows? He'll never admit that he lost. He's an egomaniac. He's narcissistic. He's an egomaniac. I can't. This guy's a fool. I think that it's only a matter of time before the new platform Threads integrates all the different capacities that you have on Twitter, such as direct messaging, such as being able to add in the gifs, maybe to do something like spaces, all of those sorts of things. I think it'll only be a matter of time before it completely fills a void that you might otherwise have right this moment, where you still want to follow things on Twitter because that's where people are for the most part. But 30 million people downloaded it yesterday. I mean, that's just unreal. So I had to go on blast about that. But something that's been just driving me crazy and makes me go nuclear is when I'm out driving and suddenly, or not even suddenly, it starts raining and you're driving down the road, and I don't know why this has me going nuclear, but it just does. Have you ever seen people driving in the rain with their windows down?
Yeah.
Because I have, and I don't understand it. I'm like, what are you doing? It's not, and we're not talking drizzle. We're not talking about a spritz here. We're talking about enough rain that you got to be getting wet in your car. And it drives me nuts because I don't understand it. I'd love to stop and say, excuse me, pardon me, do you have any Grey Poupon? Could you tell me what the hell you're doing out there with your window down? It's raining. You got to be getting splashed. I really don't understand it. And the fact that I can't explain it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I got no real good answers for you. My sister and I, as kids, used to hold our hands out to see who could like stand there the longest with their hand out with the rain pelting, because it hurts when you're going a certain speed.
Right.
So it's a test of will. But I don't think that's the case with most of the people that you're probably seeing.
No, I am not seeing hands out the window. I am merely seeing them driving along, window down, all the way down. We're not talking a little down. We're talking all the way down. They don't have a rain shield, and it's coming down hard enough that they should have their windows up. I'm perplexed by this, and it has me going nuclear. And on that note, I will bid everybody adieu here this evening. I want to thank Buzz Sports CLE. I want to thank Craig Fountain, Madison. Great job as always. Thank you for being here. And we will be back next week. And we are chasing down some guests here in the coming week so that we can get some additional insights on what's going on in the Cleveland sports landscape and around the state of Ohio. Maybe some Ohio State football as we get ramped up for college football season 2. That's going to be big time there as well. See if the Buckeyes can bounce back, and all kinds of good stuff as we head toward next week. So, Madison, appreciate your time as always. And you've been watching Going Nuclear, full-blown coverage of the land.